All right. All right, here we are. Oh, we're live. Imagine that. All right, everyone. Welcome back to Basement Radio Arcade Podcast. We took a 2-week hiatus. Week 1 was my birthday. Week 2 of this year, I had strep throat. So that's been my new year so far. Started off well, then I got strep throat, and we had to postpone last week's podcast. But we have a great show for everyone tonight. We have a returning guest, a gaming industry legend, somebody who joined us as a guest 2 years ago. We have David Jaffe back. David.
Hello. How you doing? What's up, fellas?
Awesome, man. Welcome back to BRAP. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us again. We're really super excited to have you on and talk some video games.
Let me ask you a question before you get started. Is it good form or bad form if I have your chat in my site? Do you not want me looking at your chat?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfectly okay.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. So welcome back. I mean, what have you been up to the last two? Well, I guess since you last came on 2 years ago. I think we had you the last time. You guys were, I think, wrapping up on Drawn to Death, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, we wrapped up on Drawn to Death, all right. We're good and wrapped on Drawn to Death. So Drawn to Death came out. I remain very proud of it. I think it's got great game design, really fun multiplayer game. I will go to my grave or my cremation urn or what have you, suggesting that it was a conceptually and mechanically misunderstood game. Doesn't mean we didn't make some mistakes and fuck up, but regardless of it, if it was or not, it did not do very well. Sony's pulling it off the servers in March, so there's a few more months to play it. Reviewers, with the exception of enough, and I can count on one hand the number of reviewers that genuinely enjoyed it and, quote, got it, which I very much appreciated. But most reviewers savaged it, fucking hated it for a variety of reasons. So after that, we were doing some other games for a publisher, and that publisher had sort of a financial shift. It's a big fucking company. You would know it if I told you, which I won't. And they're like, yeah, we can't fund that game anymore. And I was like, you know what, fellas, we kept the skeleton crew for a round to try to make a small game. I wasn't feeling it. I'm like, let's just kind of shut it down. So we shut down Bartlett Jones, which was the name of the company, a little less than a year ago. I took a month off and I said, what do I want to do next? And since that time, I've been basically really getting into the world of live streaming, not doing video game streaming at all, but more kind of like what you guys do. It's not a podcast. It's just me. I've recently bought on a producer. We stream probably anywhere from 2 on the low side to 7 on the high side. Talk shows a week. Sometimes we have guests. Sometimes we have call-ins, but it's always sort of geek topics, game topics, sometimes political, things like that. And I've been doing that pretty much nonstop and raising my kids. So that's what I've been up to.
I got to say, when I can catch it live, I really do enjoy the streamcast. It's definitely interesting, and you have a nice variety of people in the live chat. It's really interesting because I don't see that a lot. I feel like a lot of the podcasts that I see tend to be people who kind of think alike. And
Yeah, we have a little. I mean, they're going to start asking me to pay them soon because there's a little cavalcade of characters that are recurring, and I don't pay them and I don't know them, but they just keep showing up, and they really add to the stream and offer a great deal of entertainment in different positions. And they're not willing to jump in and debate me and fight with me, and I have a lot of fun doing it. I think the main thing these days is trying to find that balance. You guys probably know the balance between finding things to talk about and discuss that are fresh and not let's discuss the fucking Gillette razor thing again, or it's the same topics everybody's talking about. So finding fresh topics is hard, and keeping it fun and light but still genuine. You want to talk about serious shit sometimes, but at the same time, there's a point where it just gets to be a downer if everybody's just arguing all goddamn day. So I'm still struggling to find that balance, but it is a lot of fun, and the cast that shows up is a lot of fun, and so far, so good.
Yeah, no, it's great, and I did link the your YouTube channel in the description below, so I encourage everyone who's watching it to definitely check out David's podcast. It's really great, very entertaining stuff, and sometimes you actually learn some things. I've come away with some things I didn't know before. So
purely accidental, nonsense.
Yeah. I gotta say the political stuff's very interesting. We don't talk politics a lot here on BRAP. Because I'm afraid. Well, I'm not afraid, but I'm sure. I'm sure we'd probably lose some viewership, get some hate mail.
Yeah, you will. But the reason I stopped doing it, I didn't care about that because you know what? I mean, I show my daughters. My daughters are at that prime susceptibility of social media right now. I know your kids are younger than mine, but mine are like 15 and 12. And they'll look at like my YouTube channel or my Twitter feed or whatever and say, Dad, you lost 3 viewers. I'm like, good, fuck them. Because I don't mean, I mean, it's absolutely true because ultimately what you want is you want the people who want to be there. And if somebody, if I lose 5 viewers because they're like, he's talking about politics and that's not friendly, that's okay. Because the one guy or girl who shows up and sticks around is a genuine fan of what we're doing. And so I would rather have 5,000 genuine fans than 50,000 fair-weathered friends. So that's the way it goes.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And, it's crazy. I mean, I've actually, and guys, we've talked about this. We've actually lost people. People have actually stopped following us on Twitter because we've been critical of like things like, let's say, the Xbox, or maybe I've been critical of Donald Trump, and people have stopped following me because of that. I feel like and not to digress here, but I feel like it's cool. We all have difference of opinions, yes. But I feel like this, for whatever reason, this period of time in my life, more than any other, and maybe because it's social media, I feel like if you have a difference of opinion from someone, it's like you can't be friends with that person, or you can't have any kind of civil discord or interaction with them.
I think there's truth to that. For me personally, if I may, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot, as I'm trying to steer my stream, for a while, I really loved getting down and dirty with people on Twitter and debating and all that. And I was doing a stream yesterday, and I think I just hit a wall where I was like, you know what? This is pointless. It's like, if you really want to have a real conversation, I'm up for that. But it's gotten to the point where there's so many, quote, facts out there on all fucking sides that you can't. I literally posted a clip that NBC News put up last night from Martin Luther King from the 60s. And it was a beautifully articulated, of course, because it was Martin Luther King, beautifully articulated interview he did where he was talking about this sort of theory of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. And he was talking about how after slavery, you're like, dude, it's the fucking Basement Arcade podcast. Shut the fuck up.
Oh, no, man. Keep going.
But it was fascinating. He was talking about, it's like, look, after slavery was abolished by Lincoln and everyone in America in 1863, or he's like, a lot of white people were given land. They were given a lot of things after the Civil War that they could use to sort of build themselves up. Black people weren't given shit. In fact, his word, he didn't say given shit. He said, black people were freed into hunger. They were freed into poverty. And so he was articulating this and basically saying, look, it's not that black people are lazy, like a lot of people will accuse them of, a lot of racist people. He's like, a lot of black people don't have the fucking boots. It's like you're saying, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. A lot of black people don't have the benefits that a lot of you white people have. We don't even have boots, some of us, right? And I was like, and that, he wasn't angry. It wasn't Malcolm X. It wasn't me poorly articulating it. It was fucking Martin Luther King. And so I tweet this out last night. I'm like, hey, this is really cool. This is a really interesting way to express it. And wouldn't you know it, no, it's not true. It's not true. There's no racism in America. That's just utter bullshit. And I'm like, you know what? And I don't mean that to be silly. I mean it to kind of be, it's really training me to say, it's not that I don't want to talk about politics because I'm worried about getting down in the muck with it. Mm-hmm. It's because everybody's got their own selected facts that fit their worldview already. And it's just stopped being fun. It's just standing there and getting punched in the fucking face. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk about, so like on tomorrow's stream, I'm literally talking about, one of the things we're talking about are like the creepiest and coolest deathbed visions that people have had minutes before they die. No one's going to argue with me about that.
Someone might, David.
I've gone from trying to be Bill Maher to trying to be Jay Leno. I don't give a shit. I can't handle it anymore. So that's what's up.
Oh my goodness, that's too funny. I don't want to be rude to my fellow co-host, but I forgot to introduce everyone else. Want to say hello, Eric Jackson. What's going on, man?
What's going on, everybody? Happy to be here.
All right, B Money, what is going on, my man?
Not much, man. Another great Wednesday. Jaffe's in the building, so let's get it.
Yes, sir. Slow Mo, what is going on?
What's up, man? I'm here and I'm alive. So
It's all you can ask for these days, man. Your
Exactly.
health, life. Yes. So, all right. So, we'll get to some topics here shortly. I'm going to go to live chat here. See if there's any, no questions yet for David. Everyone in the live chat, if you guys have any questions for David, please feel free to ask them and we'll get to them. I asked the co-host if you guys can kind of keep an eye on the chat too, so we don't miss any questions. But
no problem.
yeah, Dave, I want to go back to Drawn to Death real quick because I actually enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. For me, it was kind of it gave me kind of like a Twisted Metal vibe.
Oh yeah, it was supposed to. It was Twisted Metal on feet.
Yeah, exactly. And it took me back to even like my high school days. I used to draw shit like that. I'd be in detention and or in social studies or whatever the case was, and I was always drawing shit like in my notebooks. And that kind of took me back to that time in my life. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people didn't get the game. I remember the review that I think someone said it was grotesque or something, or I don't remember exactly what it was. You mentioned it on your stream recently.
There were a lot of really, there were, the one that I always come back to is IGN, which gave it a 4 out of 10. And that it pissed me off, not because of the number, because Polygon gave it a 5 out of 10, but it was a wonderful review. It was like, oh, okay, I don't agree with this guy, but he clearly played the game, spent time with it, knew what we were trying to do, and it just didn't work for him. No problem. But IGN's was fucking mean spirited. It was the guy was literally he was insulted by the game. It clearly insulted his Victorian sensibilities. I don't fucking know. So we had a number of reviews. Literally the one that bothered me the most, do you mind if I go into this story real quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
So the guys at Game Informer did a podcast where they were taking the piss out of this game. And one of my favorite parts of this game was the narrator, was the announcer, right? Mm-hmm. And this guy, the guys at IGN, and the guy talked like this. He's like, headshot, double kill, triple kill. And the guys at Game Informer clearly spent all of 10 minutes with this game because they're like, can you believe Jaffe even has that? It sounds like it's like this game is so stuck in the 90s. And I'm like, dude, if you would have played the game, you would have had an experience where this narrator clearly starts breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience and admitting that he lives with his mom. He has not worked in video games since the 90s. And he's so thrilled to be working again. And he forms this relationship with the player. He starts thinking he's buddies with the player. He doesn't like free-to-play games and because he's trying to save up for a car. He totally gets into his fucking life story, which I get. Maybe that's not your kind of humor, but I assure you I'm not so tone deaf that I was like, oh, this is like back in Midway, Ready to Rumble days. Of course, that kid's still like that, right? Right? It's like, no, you motherfucker. I'm making a statement about that. But that was more of the shit that they just didn't give it the time of day. I guess because of how it looked and how on the surface it was a very vulgar game. But when you scratch beneath the surface, there was a very deep story about this kid in school who's getting abused by his father, who's getting beaten up at school.
Yep.
The only guy he connects with in his life is his brother, who's gone off into the military and frankly gotten not kicked out, but he's gotten discharged because he lost his leg in the war. But his family doesn't know that. And so he's just kind of like gone radio silent. His family hasn't talked to his brother in like 4 fucking months. And the kid's like, where'd my brother go? All this shit is all in Drawn to Death. And the only thing the critics saw was the surface of it, which was intentional. But if you're a player, you get drawn in and go, what the fuck? And then it's like, holy shit, there's a story here. Mm-hmm. The fact that none of these critics did their fucking job and actually gave time to the game to discover that, I think really for me was exceptionally disappointing for me. So there you go.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talked about something I found very interesting on your podcast maybe a week ago, or maybe it was I can't remember if it was a week ago or not, but it had to do with do gamers hate media? Yes. And I think your producer was, I guess she used to be in gaming media.
Yes, April.
And so I there's a hill that I've chosen to die on for whatever reason. It's biased game media. I don't know if you've heard this, David, where certain people of a community believe that the media is biased against Microsoft and all things Xbox. Do you find that do you think there is some kind of media bias? I haven't been able to get anyone from the industry their perspective on this, and I'm just wondering, do you think that kind of bias does exist against certain companies?
You mean at a conscious level, like the IGN folks get together and say, "How are we going to fuck Xbox this year?"
Well, some people would have you believe that's what happens.
Some people would,
Yeah.
and they're fucking morons, right?
Yeah.
I mean, end of the day, what I can tell you is, I mean, it's so dumb. It's almost. I mean, I'm not even kidding you. It's almost like you want to say, "Are you grown ass adults having these conversations?" I get it if you're 12 and you just came in from the fucking playground and you're asking me that. Not you, but I'm saying it's ridiculous. It's like, look, the media, it's a, first off, let's be clear. It's a fucking piece of hardware. Okay. You bought it. Maybe you can only afford one. I get it that maybe sometimes it sucks if you got the one that everybody doesn't like or whatever, but the media is, are there websites out there that try to be sensationalistic and get clicks? You goddamn right there are. But ultimately, if you're talking about the main websites, I don't think IGN sits around and says, let's fuck Xbox. End of the day, right now, this generation, Sony has tons of first-party exclusive games that are well-reviewed and well-loved by a lot of people. And I'm sure that can look like bias, but that's just because Sony is succeeding right now. But I think Xbox is totally primed to succeed next generation. And if Sony doesn't vary their portfolio next generation, they run the risk of being left behind. But this idea that there's like mainstream media bias over hardware, it's just dumb. It's like, and end of the day, what if there is? Then go read a site that doesn't have the bias that bothers you so much. But I wish a lot, that Gillette ad, if we, here I am talking about the Gillette ad, there should be a version of the Gillette ad for gamers. It's like, you know what, gamers, it's a fucking piece of hardware. It doesn't love you. The company doesn't love you. Nathan Drake is not real. He's not really your buddy. It's like, play the games, play the hardware, enjoy your fucking life. Unclench a little bit. It's just embarrassing. It's embarrassing is what it is.
Yeah. I like when people say, well, it's like sports teams. Well, they don't love you either.
Exactly.
No, the greatest example of that was that Jimmy Fallon movie Fever Pitch. Did you ever see Fever Pitch?
Yeah.
Where he's in the bar and he sees the two competing teams that had just played, and it's the players are all hanging out and laughing, and he's like, "What the fuck?" And they're like, "Dude, it's not a real war. It's a game. It's a game, man. The Xbox executives don't hate the Sony executives. It's just business. We're just working."
Exactly. They hang out. They eat dinner together. It's
That's right.
Yeah. Hey, there's a question in the chat from Cyper. It says, what came first, the idea of the multiplayer mechanics and drawing to death, or the aesthetic?
The aesthetic, the story came first, frankly. Most of my ideas start with that. And then I was debating for a while whether we wanted to make it a single player story-based game or a multiplayer game or both. And Sony pretty much decided that for me because they said, well, we want to fund a multiplayer free-to-play game. So if you want to do this as a story game, we really like it, Jaffe, but that's not what we're doing with this particular swing at the ball. And I said, okay, fuck it. And so we went with multiplayer.
Wow, that's interesting because like the narrative that you hear about Sony is that they only care about single player games, but they actually wanted a multiplayer game. That
was the initiative from their San Diego studio. So remember, they were really going all in on this free to play console idea, and it doesn't mean my game or Kill Strain or Guns Up were great and they were just ahead of their time. But frankly, it took Fortnite to really convince people that, oh shit, before Fortnite, there were a few games, but for the most part, Fortnite was the first game that came along to let people go, oh shit, free to play will work on console. Up until that time, it was really the world of PC and mobile. So Sony San Diego was going all in on saying, hey, let's do free to play. And Christian Phillips, who ran that division, was like, look, I'm looking for free to play multiplayer games. And Scott Rohde, who heard the pitch and was kind enough to say, let's give Jaffe and his new team a shot, was like, this might fit in perfectly with what Christian's looking for. So, but I don't know what they're working on now. And even if I did, I couldn't share it, but I don't. But I think now you're right. I think they have found a really strong niche for themselves in cinematic story mostly single player games, with the exception of a few things like PSVR or MLB The Show or whatever. And that clearly they are, making a lot of gamers happy with it. So I expect them to continue that into the next generation. I think they're going to be in a lot of trouble if they don't diversify into the next generation. I think Xbox is poised to eat their fucking lunch next generation if it turns out that Xbox manages these new studios they've acquired well. And if Sony only continues, there's no doubt Sony's going to make phenomenal games next generation. But if they only make these single player story cinematic games and they don't show up with an RPG, if they don't show up with a more accessible racing game, if they don't show up with maybe a first person competitive shooter, if it's all just look at our amazing stories that you can finish in 15 or 20 hours and then you're done, I think Xbox is going to be in a position to potentially rule the roost next generation, or at least give them a run for their money.
Interesting. That's so what are your thoughts on the acquisitions of those studios by Microsoft? I mean, obviously that's a positive for them.
Yeah.
Any fear potentially that Microsoft might take this too far? I've heard that argument.
What does that mean?
Oh, they're gonna buy everyone, or Sony's gonna start buying studios. It's gonna be a bidding war.
Why is that bad?
I mean, I don't think it's bad. I mean, I think it's, as long as we're getting good content, it's a win-win for consumers.
Yeah, no, I think I mean, some of the studios have better pedigrees than other studios that they've bought, and I still think they could do with buying a really massive. They are spending a lot of money on their own studios as well. Like there's what are they called, the Collective or the Initiative, or there's a group in Santa Monica. Yeah. So, and Mike Ybarra, who's one of the executives over there, who I know comes into my stream from time to time, and he publicly stated. He's like, because one of the criticisms has always been of Microsoft back in the day that they micromanage the studios and they micromanage them into the ground. And one of the reasons that Sony has been so successful artistically forever, but certainly artistically and commercially as of late, is because their executives are so good at managing but not getting in the way of the creative process of the developer's individual vision. And so Mike Ybarra was basically saying, that old micromanaging Microsoft is a thing of the past. And what they're doing now is much more like Sony, which is they're letting these guys run, within limits so that they can actually make some really cool shit. So I think the acquisitions are going to be really good for Microsoft. I think, they've got a couple of RPG companies now. They definitely have, a first-person shooter company. They have a racing game company. And for all you want to say about Gran Turismo it's still like Forza, even though I don't own an Xbox One, Forza, the new one, is the first racing game I've actually wanted to buy in a long time because it looks accessible and cool and fun. Gran Turismo is fucking intimidating as fuck to me. I'm like, I don't want anywhere near that game. I'm not knocking it. It feels like it's too simulation-y and it's too car porn. And I'm like, that's great for a niche of the audience, but if you want to open that audience up, you need to get people who just like cars and think they're cool and want to drive fast, but don't give a shit about, oh, look at the nut bolt here on the gear shift 32 is X inches wider on the wheelbase. What the fuck are you talking about? I just want to drive cars fast. That's all I want to do. So
that's a great point. I mean, they don't have anything like a Forza Horizon, which the beauty of Forza Horizon is just how accessible that game is.
Yeah.
So Eric, do you have any questions for David before we get to EA canceling Star Wars? Another Star Wars game?
Nope.
All right.
There was one more question in the chat, and it was from Rob the Mod for David. He wanted to know how you came up with the idea for the story. For Drawn to Death, the story.
It's when you work in video games, for the most part, it is a very organic process. So right when I went into Scott Rohde's office, we didn't know for the longest time. And if you don't know what Drawn to Death is, it's a shooter set in this kid's doodles in his high school notebook. We didn't know for the longest time that kid was a high school kid. For a while, I'm like, is this some crazy serial killer? And he's doing these drawings like in his notebook because his therapist has told him that that's like some kind of therapy. Like I had no idea what the hand was that was drawing this or anything. And so something happens, a concept artist comes in And it's like, oh, that looks like high school drawing. Okay, what if this was in high school? And then suddenly it gets set in high school. And then, oh, I bet the guy has a crush. Let's design a character around the fact that he had a crush on this girl. And everything kind of builds on top of everything else. Every game I've ever worked on, the story gets written as you build the game because everything lends itself to everything else. Kratos and the whole idea of him being in servitude to Ares only came about because Joe Wright, one of our designers, and I were looking at Shinobi on the PS2 because Shinobi on the PS2 had this beautiful long flowing scarf that came off his neck. And what that really did was functional. No matter where they had their camera, you could always track where your hero was. So Joe and I were like, well, we need that for Kratos because he's getting lost in all the enemies. And she said, what if he had these glowing chains? And I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Well, suddenly now that we have glowing chains, which totally came out of a practical need to solve a visual issue, suddenly we had to write a story around it. And it just one thing builds on top of another until the producer says, you're out of money. You got to stop. So that's how it works usually.
Cool.
Awesome. Dave, real quick, so you mentioned God of War. What are your thoughts on the recent God of War?
I hear it's great. I haven't played it. I have no desire to play it. Sony Santa Monica sent me a beautiful edition of it. It's behind me. Everyone says it's phenomenal. A lot of people say it's game of the generation. I may play it one day, but it's just not my cup of tea anymore. There's a few reasons I don't play it. One of the analogy I always use is kind of like, you know, one of your true loves comes into town that you broke up with a long time ago, and she's got her new boyfriend with him, and she's like, hey, you want to come out? You want to come out to dinner with me and him? And I'm like, no. I don't. I don't. But to be fair, the other part, maybe the bigger part is, I don't really play games like that anymore. I haven't played Horizon Zero Dawn. I loved Breath of the Wild, but I only played it for about 6 hours. As I've gotten older, I've gotten more into more pure gamey games. Like I love Return of the Obra Dinn. I love Astrobot Rescue on PSVR. I love Dusk. I love a Medieval. I'm much more about, even though I do like stories and games, I don't get into the cutscenes. I don't need a big narrative. I just want to play and then get on with my life. I find there's other mediums that tell stories better than games. And so it's even if I had no relationship with God of War, it's nothing personal. It's just not my cup of tea anymore.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, guys. Let's get to EA, who if you guys saw Kotaku put an article, I think it was yesterday, that they have canceled the open world Star Wars game, which I believe was I don't want to say leftovers, what was left over from what Amy Hennig was working on, if I'm not mistaken. Is that
it was, yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, I don't know. Obviously, Star Wars is a beloved movie franchise of mine. It's been part of my life, my entire life, for the entire 42 years that I've been on planet Earth. Star Wars has been like my brother, my sister, more or less. And so, you know, hearing this was kind of disappointed, and I was kind of disappointed to hear this. And you know, I haven't been a big fan of some of the Star Wars games that EA has put out. Wasn't a big fan of Battlefront 1 or 2. You know, I think the microtransaction things kind of turned me off a little bit to the last Battlefront, and I just never went back to it. And I think in part too because there was other content that was coming out. But there was an update today, gentlemen. Before I get to everyone's thoughts on this, I do want to read an update that IGN put out. It looks like, and I can't pull this up now for whatever reason because my computer decided to act up. Oh shit! Hold on a second, guys.
The update, if you want me to, the update, the gist was right. This was that they had to have something out by 2020, and this big open world game was not going to make it in time, and so they decided to shift resources to an unannounced Star Wars game that will be out in 2020, and maybe this one will come back to light down the road. Is I think that's what the update was, correct?
Yeah, that was it.
That was it. There was another statement that EA put out here because IGN finally decided to cooperate with me and come up here on my computer. The EA said there's been speculation overnight about one of our Star Wars projects as a natural part of the creative process. The great work by our team in Vancouver continues. and will evolve into future Star Wars content and games. We're fully committed to making more Star Wars games. We're very excited about Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order from Respawn, which I can't wait for. And we'll share more about our projects when this time is right. So,
we're really excited about it until we cancel it.
Right.
Right. So this begs the question: what? 2020 is 2 years away. I think Jason Schreier speculated that this is going to coincide with the launch of new hardware, the new consoles, PS5, new Xbox, and I don't know, gentlemen. I mean, what? I make no bones about it. I haven't been happy with EA's handling of the Star Wars franchise. And I think, and Dave, I don't know how you feel, if you played any of the Star Wars games or how you feel about EA's handling of the franchise, but what are everyone's thoughts? I mean, do you guys feel like maybe Disney needs to take a look at this and say, EA, what's going on?
Well,
and maybe
yeah,
look at the developer, or is everything?
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
I was gonna say absolutely. They so they started their deal with EA in 2013, and now here we are 6 years later, and there's been 2 games, and if I recall correctly, 2 cancellations, or is it just 1 cancellation? I think they're 2 for 2 basically.
2 for And Amy Hennig's project was shut down, and then not this one.
Yeah, so it's the first one was Battlefront 1, which was pretty much seemed to be like a kind of rushed project. There's no campaign. It's just a multiplayer. Seemed kind of, I mean, some people would say it was a bit of a reskin of the Battlefront game. And then you got Battlefront 2, which had all the controversy with the microtransactions. It just seemed, and EA, and not EA, but I'm sorry, Disney calling EA like, hey, what's the problem here? As you know, their new Star Wars movies about to come out. So there seems to be just nothing easy happening with this deal. I mean, can we just get the Star Wars game that doesn't have any controversy? That's a full game that everyone can enjoy, and there isn't a whole bunch of stuff going on with it. Please, like, I'm hoping that's what Fallen Order is. But I mean, like E said, you know, I wouldn't surprise me at all if like a month or 2 from now we hear Fallen Order's canceled, and it's just like, yo, what is happening? So I mean, if I'm Disney, yeah, I'm looking at this, and I may not want to cancel my contract with them, but like once it's up, I'm going to be like, I may want to shop around. You know, let's see what Ubisoft has, or I mean, dare I say it, Activision. I don't want to say Activision, but you know, it's just. It hasn't been good, and I'm thinking that I've been with you guys for 6 years and I got 2 games out of it. That's just not good enough.
I was gonna say real quick, you interject real quick. You know, I also feel like those games have been very uninspiring. It's like they took, you know, they kind of just took the nostalgia, fed off the nostalgia of Star Wars fans. So you know what, we're gonna throw in Luke Skywalker and Darth Vader, and you can play as these characters, you know, in a multiplayer setting. And that's it. You know, there's, you know, and I'm like, okay, that's great, but I want story, you know.
Okay, but
I don't have to have.
Okay, but I mean, if I may be crude, it's like going out with the prostitute and going, why am I not feeling romantic about this? It's like when you sign up with EA and you think you're getting Naughty Dog, the fault is at Lucas. Everybody knew what this deal was when it was announced. You're going to go to EA. I mean, it's a mismatch of the brand. The brand is a brand, like you say, people love the characters, they love story, they love the lore of that world. EA historically has never been a company that does that, right? So why would you expect them to suddenly become Naughty Dog? Why would you expect them to become Sony Santa Monica? I frankly think the game that they're making in Infinity Ward right now is the only one that does stand a chance, because that developer does have a history of doing really good single-player campaigns. But the idea that EA at a management level is set up to support developers like Amy Hennig that are like into story and character and a revelation that comes at the end of Act 2 that spins the entire thing on its head and what you thought, I mean, that's not EA. That's like literally like the band geeks in high school sitting at the jocks table and thinking it's going to be a good conversation. It's like, no, it's a bad match, right? I think when you said Ubisoft, though, I mean, look, what I said earlier on Twitter tonight was I think EA should just be like, you know what, Ubisoft, if Lucas is okay with it, pay us out of our contract. You guys go off and reskin Beyond Good and Evil 2, which people hate, not because of what they've shown, which I think looks amazing, but because it's called Beyond Good and Evil 2, reskin it as a Star Wars open world game. Everybody goes home fucking happy. I think EA is a terrible publisher for this license. I think it's awful.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt too when they announced that it was an exclusive deal. Because when you look at what Disney's done, at least with the Marvel thing, they've kind of given up, exclusive deals. They decided to pick certain developers for games that they felt like that developer would be great at. So I think they should have did the same thing with Star Wars. I think they should have handpicked certain developers for certain type of games.
Look, man, I don't know if Sony would do it. Sony did it with Marvel, and I was thrilled they did it with Marvel with Spider-Man. But if Sony walks over to Lucas with a big fucking check and says, you know what, the minute you guys are done with this EA deal, we want Insomniac, or we want Sony Santa Monica, or we want Naughty Dog to basically make a story-based Star Wars game. It's a machine to fucking print money. But you're exactly right. They have to give it to the teams that fit the brand. And it was just a dumb fucking move. Everybody saw it a mile away. I don't even know if the executives in charge of it are still there, but what a bunch of fucking morons. I mean, I'm serious. It's stupid.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say. I wonder what like the terms of the deal are, because it's, like in some record companies, you have to produce X amount of, albums before, the contract is fulfilled or whatever the case may be. It just seems like for the fact that they keep canceling, but you haven't really heard much, back from Disney. I just wonder what the deal was.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that they keep canceling that bothers me. It's what they cancel. Because what they put out is par for the course, standard boilerplate EA games.
Right.
Battlefront looked great. I didn't think they were inspired. I'm with you. I thought they were kind of boring. I played it for about 2 hours and I was done with both of them. Mm-hmm. But it's the kind of stuff they're canceling, which is what Star Wars fans really want, that EA just isn't good at.
Right. And even with like Battlefront 2, like they did the thing where they kind of got people excited for half a second. They're like, oh, we're going to play as like somebody from the Empire. We're going to actually go to that side and kind of play that out for a change. And then it's like, no,
Yeah, I only played that for about an hour and I was bored of the story in that game. It was a terrible campaign.
It wasn't a good campaign at all.
And meanwhile, they own BioWare, who made one of the best Star Wars games ever in Knights of the Old Republic. And I'm like, can we get a remake or something? I mean, you have the license. Come on.
They probably don't have the license anymore. I mean, that's still a deal they have to make with Lucas, right? They can't just keep publishing that game over and over. It's still probably a deal, but you are right though. They do have a company in EA that's great with storytelling. I don't know why they don't give it to those guys.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, yeah, that's a great point. Why not tap BioWare with doing a franchise? I don't know. None of this
the game would have took too long. That's why. The same reason that these games are being canceled. The game would have took too long if they would have gave it to BioWare, because BioWare would have cultivated a great story, a great RPG, and that's not what they want. Obviously.
Yeah. And they're telling you.
They're telling you what they said today. They want something that they can push out. And like we were saying in the DM, it sounds like they want something that they can try to push, before these new consoles hit, or at the same time, to capitalize on that. And whatever this game was probably going to take too long, or was taking too long, to make that.
I almost feel like this game that they're now making, that's going to launch with next gen consoles, is going to be a battle royale game where you use build up or points or whatever, or microtransactions, have a quote unquote battle pass. Yes, I'm looking at you, Fortnite, to unlock Star Wars characters.
It's called Order 66. Wasn't that what it was, where Palpatine says execute Order 66?
Yeah.
And so it's basically that day everybody's 100 Jedis, and whoever's the last Jedi standing is the one that gets to go live on Tatooine. Everyone else is wiped out.
Can you imagine like 100 people in a Star Wars battle royale game just wielding lightsabers, just using force powers on each other?
You know what they should do to piss people off? because I happen to love Last Jedi, but I know a lot of people didn't. They should do an entire gambling game set on the casino planet in Last Jedi, because that's what everybody who hates Last Jedi, they're like, that was Canto Bright or whatever the fuck it was called. That's the worst part of Last Jedi, they say. So they should just do a gambling game set on the casino as a big fuck you, because you know they've lost the fans already anyway. So might as well go out with a blaze of glory.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the backlash of that movie. I loved the movie. I thought it was one of the better Star Wars movies in a long time. But
or you do like a farming simulator game where you just take care of those big horse-looking creatures.
That's right. And you can like drink the milk like Luke in Last Jedi. Where you like,
blue milk squeezing game.
That's awesome.
I got to tell you that
how many containers can you fill in 5 minutes?
That's right. Yeah. Would you like to fill containers faster? Pay 99 cents for an extra.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, they probably would do that. They'd probably sell like bigger containers. You could fill up more.
It probably would.
Jesus.
And by the way, I would support it. I wouldn't buy it. I'd tell people to walk away from a company like that. But you know, I'm a fan of that shit. If people want to support it, people buy that shit, man. Don't ask me why, but they do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll have to. We'll have to dive into microtransactions in a little bit. I'm interested in getting your perspective on that.
Yeah.
But Forte, what's going on, man?
What up, though?
Jamie Forte is finally made it.
Man, I was gonna jump in while I was on my way home, but I was like, "No, I ain't gonna do that. I'll just wait till I get home."
Yeah, no worries, man. No worries. So, Forte, any thoughts on this whole EA canceling Star Wars? What are your thoughts, man?
Man, okay. Well, I'm never gonna be against them. Maybe they thought the game was gonna be ready before it actually was. Maybe they thought it was going to be ready in time for the new consoles to actually release. So no one really knows what's going on in that situation. But I'm not going to say that they're wrong for maybe pushing it off. I don't think they're really going to cancel it. I think it's going to be something that they just delay until they completely get out the whatever title they want to have out ready for the new systems that come out. I guess the biggest thing is does people really have a problem with them, dropping one IP to actually get another one ready for next gen that comes out?
I don't think that game ever sees the light of day.
It may not. I mean, we don't know exactly what they all had planned for the game. Me personally, I think I'm with you, Slow-Mo. I don't think that game actually probably wasn't doing well, or basically that game had went through two different developers at this point now, because that was the one that Visceral Games was working on before they got closed down. So
from what I recall, Visceral was working on it with Amy Hennig.
Right.
Visceral got closed down, Amy Hennig left, and then the word was that EA Vancouver was taking it over, but they were going to do a different game, but they were kind of taking the same assets that they had started with at Visceral to kind of build off of, but now that's canceled / on hiatus, whatever you want to call it.
That was Jay Raymond's team, and then Jay Raymond left.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Jade Raymond. Yeah, she did leave.
Yeah,
that was what, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Well, they made it sound like she left, but we're not sure about that one either, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. For me, I just think overall, a lot of people are going to be looking at EA with a lot of side eyes when it comes to anything, when it comes to cancellation, especially around Star Wars, because it is not that far from people's memories what happened with Battlefront 2. So anything with Star Wars involving them is, kind of hurts people's feelings when it comes to Star Wars, because we had the whole game that was going to come out where people actually were really looking forward to that. And Star Wars just hasn't had, outside of the Battlefront series, hasn't had really a good showing, because we were supposed to get the Star Wars 1313 that got canceled and moved off. So it's just a bunch of games for Star Wars that just keeps getting moved off and off. And at this point, I'm just wondering if Disney just needs to find another publisher to actually handle the Star Wars licensing.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement they need a new publisher for this, because EA is just not getting it done.
Well, they either need a new publisher or they basically need to become a publisher again, albeit a small one. And they need to do like what Marvel Games has. Marvel Games has like 8 people, and then they basically work with all kinds of different developers that fit the brand properly, which is how we get Spider-Man from Insomniac and Sony. So
Right.
I think the best thing is if Lucas says, you know what, we're going to start up a publishing division just for the Lucas stuff, and we're going to basically go where the talent is for the right game. And then maybe you do reach out to EA to say, hey, maybe you can make us, a game that fits what you guys do well. But then maybe we'll reach out to Naughty Dog if they're free and Sony and say, hey, what do you guys think about basically making, Uncharted in the world of Star Wars? That is
Right.
ideally, if they're willing to sort of build a small little team, that's probably how they're going to get the most bang for their brands.
That's how it kind of used to be though. Like even last gen, like I feel like we had a variety of different Star Wars games.
The difference though was that they were actually a proper publisher, so they would never reach out to EA. They were the publisher, and they had developers that worked with them. But this would sort of be a co-publishing deal, I guess, kind of like Marvel Games and Sony published Spider-Man.
Yeah. The biggest thing that I take away is it's like EA has the perfect development team to make the Battlefront games. As much as we didn't like the microtransaction side of it, DICE is the best ones to make the Battlefield games because it fits what they do. They don't have another team that can build like those action adventure versions of the games because they're all about games as a service and multiplayer games for the most part now. Especially with BioWare doing Anthem, and then they also had their other team working on Mass Effect. They haven't really had that 1-2 team that could actually bring up another game like Star Wars. So I always thought that they should have reached out to like Sony for something like Naughty Dog to actually give us that cinematic style Star Wars game that everybody's looking forward to get.
Agree.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. Gaming Forte, great point. So, I do want to go back to the microtransactions thing because that's kind of been a hot topic recently. I think even some European countries are looking into this as potential gambling. And I think hasn't Hawaii looked into this too?
Yeah, they're looked into creating some kind of laws, I guess, just on the state level to kind of manage it. And then I think is it Norway or Belgium? One of the
one of those. Yeah, I don't remember which one. I want to say maybe the FCC was going to look into it too.
Yeah, they talked about it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, David, as somebody who's worked on video games for many years in the industry, what are your thoughts on microtransactions? Is it do you think it's a necessary evil? Is it a good thing, bad thing?
Well, I think you have to define a couple things. When you say microtransactions, do you mean loot boxes specifically, or you mean any kind of content that you purchase that bolts onto the game post-release?
Any kind of content that bolts the game post-release.
I think that's fine. I think ultimately the only thing I have said is that and it's actually the FTC. There was a senator, and I do think her constituents were in Hawaii, that said you need to look into this, and she said we're going to have the FTC look into this, and if it constitutes what is legally defined as gambling and legally defined as what is even beyond that. I had somebody on my stream the other night call in and explain to me the difference between something can be gambling, but it can be totally legal, and then something crosses a threshold and becomes sort of what I'm calling harmful gambling, and that's when the government says we have to regulate it. So if it turns out the government looks at certain types of loot boxes and says those are officially gambling, then I think those should be regulated in some form or fashion. And there's a number of options by which that could be done. I think when you start talking about microtransactions, my take on it has always been that I think companies should be free to do whatever the fuck they want. And the biggest problem, the thing that confuses the fuck out of me is, and I think it might just be a vocal minority, and I get into fights with these people all the time online because I'm kind of like, guys, I don't necessarily love microtransactions either. There are certain games where I like buying things like in Hearthstone or whatever, but for the most part, I'm not like everybody's like, oh, you're fucking greedy. I had a guy on my YouTube channel that said, you're so greedy. I'm like, dude, I've never made a dime off microtransactions. I'm just supporting a company's right to do business in a free market the way they see fit. And I'm supporting the customer's right to say, no, thanks, we're going to fucking walk away because we want nothing to do with what you're selling. And so if a company wants to try that as a way to make more money for their game and the customer's willing to deal with it, I think it's fine. And the funny part about it is if you look at in the top 20 games of 2018, there's a lot of games that have no microtransactions at all, that are totally one and done games, and that's great. But there's also a healthy amount of games that have lots of microtransactions. So clearly customers are okay with it. Clearly customers are going, we're okay spending money on FIFA. We're okay spending money on Assassin's Creed Odyssey microtransactions. The amount of money that 2K made in the first quarter of last year was staggering. And so, and people are like, oh, it's the whales. Well, first off, studies are showing that on the console space, the whales are not as prevalent as in the in the mobile space. Okay, so it's actually being spread out amongst lots of gamer types on the console space. But beyond that, who gives a shit? If you're 2K and you're making, I think they said they made 67% of their revenue the first quarter of last year off microtransactions. If you're fucking 2K, you're like, I don't give a shit if it's one guy or 1 billion people. We made 67% of our fucking $1 billion revenue off microtransactions. What would you do? Let's not do it because some guys on a podcast said it was bad.
I agree.
Forte actually is the king of selling. What are they called? VC. What is it for 2K?
VC.
Yes, and you could probably speak to this. You could speak to this, Forte. How people come in your store and buy this and just gobble it up.
Nah, man. I mean, it's a thing. You know, a lot of like David just said, man. It's more of the YouTube and Twitter sphere that is the minority that really care about this. You know, we think we got a loud voice, but we don't. But when I see, when I can sell 300 copies of a game in a midnight launch and literally 250 of those games leave out with some type of microtransaction when it comes to VC attached to the game, we're not really changing anything because most people, they're basically giving people what they want when it comes to these microtransactions, especially with 2K. People don't want to look like everybody else. People want to have better stats than other people when they come into the game. So it gives you the ability to do that by paying for it. Now, my biggest thing is as long as it doesn't change the gameplay element and give you an competitive advantage, I really could care less. But I think 2K is one of the only few games that actually does that, and people are personally fine with it. And who are we to say to EA, and not to EA, but to 2K or any of these other companies that, hey, this is bad, we don't like this, but the people that really support it are the people not saying anything about it.
Right. And the complaint that they will say to you, because trust me, and I'm schooled in this shit, because I've had this argument with these people online for the last month. What they will say to you then is they'll say, yeah, but they're ruining the games that we like by doing this. And it's like, okay, I get that. And there are plenty of game companies where you can still go Sony first party, Microsoft first party, Nintendo first party, lots of indie games. There are a lot of games out there that don't have this stuff. But they really seem to be upset that they just think it's bad and they want it gone from everything. And it's like, sorry, man, you don't, there's fucking television shows I don't like. I just don't watch them. There are still shows that you can watch that you can like. There's still games that you can play that don't have microtransactions. I don't know why they're so up in arms about it, unless they are just massive Assassin's Creed Odyssey fans and are like, I don't know what to tell you. It's just the weirdest thing how upset they get over something that they're not being forced to buy.
Well, I think the biggest thing, especially with Assassin's Creed, is people aren't used to it being in that game. Even though it's been in past games, I think it's more of the conversation like, how does this change the gameplay element of the game now that these are in it? Is my grind harder just because you added these? And
it's
I think
great point. Great point.
And I think that's the biggest thing that people worry about in a situation like that, because if those microtransactions were never there, would people even care?
No, they probably wouldn't. And you're absolutely right. You have to be suspicious of the fact that did Ubisoft tune that game even a little bit in order to motivate people to reach for their wallet? Although a lot of people, I haven't played it, a lot of people will tell you, no, the grind is fine. But the answer to that question is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, the last time I checked, was the number 10 best-selling game of 2018. So whatever they did, the vast majority of gamers are okay with. which doesn't make it right, which doesn't mean if you're a purist, it's okay. But like I keep telling to a lot of people I talk to, it's like the more hardcore the gamer you are and the more expensive games get to make, the more you, just like movie fans and music fans, are going to have to be okay being relegated to the niche part of the industry. You're not going to get the games that you adore for the most part, unless you're talking about things from first party that are multi-crazy amounts of money to produce, because what rules the roost at the movies now? It's Marvel, it's Disney, it's the big budget shit that plays to everybody. And if you're a hardcore movie fan, you go to the art house movies. You watch something made on Netflix for a lot less money. The more hardcore you are and the more expensive games get to make, that's any fucking entertainment medium. All the hardcore people always get shoved to the margins, and they become sort of the art house fans or the indie music scene fans, because that's the cost of making things for less people.
But you know, and one thing that's funny that I didn't think until you said what you just said. When it comes to these developers, think about it. Grand Theft Auto is the most sold game ever.
Yep.
And that game has microtransactions through the wazoo when it comes to their online. I mean, to the point now that they literally sell the microtransactions with the game, and they make more money off the microtransactions than they do the game itself now.
Right. But if you want to just play GTA single player or Red Dead single player, they have not abandoned you.
They haven't.
Yeah, which is great.
Yeah, I actually think GTA Online is fine. I've never. I used to play it often, and probably for like a full year with a couple of friends. I've never spent a dime on GTA Online, and all the updates are free. So I was able to get all those updates, play the game, had no issues. I played the single player, enjoyed it. Played the online with my friends, enjoyed it. I know there are other people who were, buying the shark cards or rebuying the game to get the shark cards even cheaper and doing all that stuff. And I know that fueled me being able to play the game for free. And my answer to those people is thank you. Because I didn't want to spend money on those the update here and the heist and all that other stuff. Hey, I got it for free. I appreciate
and you're what they call social currency. That's an actual term in the industry. You're social currency. So even the people who are like, oh, but it's only the whales that spend money. It's like, dude, if the core game that you don't spend money on wasn't fun and you didn't show up, the whales would have no reason to spend their money. So you're part of the ecosystem too, even if you don't spend a dime.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. It's real interesting something you said before about if you don't like what's happening with a game, then just don't buy it. And I agree with that 1,000%. I've always say vote with your wallet. You got an issue with a particular game, you don't buy it. That was I remember, and we talked about NBA 2K. I used to buy NBA 2K every year. Used to play it every year, and then once I started to see where they were going with the My Player, I was just like, I really don't like this. And then it was the first time that I got the game. I played it, and my character was like a level 60 bum that kept getting dunked on and crossed up and falling all over the place. And I'm like, the only way I can, and I had to play every single game in the season. I'm like, I don't want to play with this bum. Like, the only way I can do anything is to spend money to get more VC to make him better. I put the game.
Well, you know what? Let me ask you this though: is that a 2K problem, or is that a 2K problem, or is that a customer based problem when it comes to the way that they consume that game? Because at some point, the customer made that game to be that way, because you can go through NBA 2K and level up and earn the VC in game, naturally through any part of the game, you always earn VC. But as soon as they gave a person the option to buy stuff, more people decide to say, hey, I think my time is more valuable in this game than it is to spend money. And people started spending money, and more people do that than actually play through the content to graduate to get everything. So I think it just happened naturally, and people just decided to want to spend more money than spend time with the game.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it doesn't become a 2K problem until the majority of their community decides I'm not doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah, I would have to imagine too. I mean, I don't play that game, but I would have to imagine the grind was not tuned as difficult before they added microtransactions, correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Right.
So, you know, they consciously are trying to get you to reach for your wallet, and I can see how that would be frustrating. Absolutely. And I think it's really unfortunate when you're talking about something like basketball or football or soccer, because you can't go anywhere else. If you don't like how they're doing it in Assassin's Creed, there's plenty of other single player action adventure
Right.
games out there. But
Good
if you
point.
want to play a basketball game, you're kind of fucked. I can understand being annoyed by that, but still, 2K's making a shit ton of money. What are you going to have them do? Change it?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
You basically say that you basically telling them we don't want $60 billion.
Right.
Yeah, and I fully understand it, because for a while they were the only game in town. EA and NBA Live was in a ditch somewhere trying to dig themselves out. And yeah, where else are you gonna go? It's the same thing with Madden. I mean, people complain, man, Madden is the same game every year. It's basically just an updated roster with a new gimmick every year. But yeah, but where else you gonna go?
Well, I'll tell you what, my fantasy is Sony first party gets the right to McMahon's updated XFL. Even though I appreciate, I appreciate the XFL. If you love the players of the NFL, you're not getting the same thing. But as a guy who just likes the game of football and doesn't really give a shit about, oh, this is fucking whatever, what's the fucking Tom Brady, or this is, you know, the new guy, you know, I don't give a shit about the players. I just want to play the game. And so, frankly, I would love for there to be somebody else that's not EA that has some kind of meaningful football license that doesn't go through the wazoo with microtransactions, because I think a bunch of Madden fans would look at it as a breath of fresh air. There's an opportunity for someone to come in and actually turn the model on its head and compete with EA with the XFL. I think somebody should do it. I hope they do.
I think, you know, that happened in 2007 when 2K came out with the All Pro Football 2K8, and that game bombed like crazy. Like nobody really played it.
They just made up a league. It wasn't based on anything.
Yeah, it was just based on the old players. So it had like the Joe Montanas, had Jerry Rice, had Emmitt Smith. You know, I mean, it had all the old players in the game, and fundamentally,
was it a good game?
Fundamentally, it was better than Madden has been ever to me.
Ever,
you know what I mean?
It's still better than Madden.
You can go on YouTube and you can go on Twitter, and people still post that game to this day. Like people are still playing it.
It's the players that matter to the majority of Madden players, then.
Yes.
Okay. Well, then, yeah, never mind.
Unless
the XFL takes off.
Yeah. I think if the XFL is popular enough, I think there's someone who will jump in that arena and take a chance, and I think they could see some success there. Because you know, I've been playing Madden for many years, and you know, these last couple of years I just haven't been into it. You know, you get tired of kind of playing the same thing, like Shlomo said, same thing with a different gimmick every year. So
which one of you guys works at the game store?
Forte.
Gaming Forte.
Okay, so do you find, because what I was going to say is maybe core gamers look at that and say, fuck that nonsense, I want nothing to do with it. But do you find that a lot of gamers who play NBA are like, we're fine with this. We don't have a problem spending money to level up our my player character so we can compete?
Oh, dude, they don't mind that at all. Not at all. Not one bit. I'll put it like this. They come into the store the day the NBA comes out, and I tell them right then and there, it's like, hey, you ready to get your ready for your NBA? And most of those people will tell you, oh yeah, I got my VC ready, I got everything I need for the game ready. And even the people that don't buy VC the day that it comes out, I always tell them, it's like, you're gonna go home, you're gonna get in the park, and you're going to see people at 80 plus overall, and you're going to be right back in here tomorrow to buy VC. And without fail, those people are right back in the store to buy VC.
Okay.
And that's basically, and I think people are kind of forced to do it because so many people do it.
Well, can I say two things about that? The first one is, explain to me the mentality of someone who can basically go home after leaving your store, and they're playing a goddamn online game, and they're like, I need VC. You know what I'll do? I'll get in my fucking car and go back to the game store. Why don't they just buy it online? I've never understood why people buy digital transactions in a real store.
That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. Why not buy from the comfort of your own home?
Right. It's like,
well, you know what? I'll take. I have a good reason why, because usually the week that the game comes out, the 2K doesn't do their 10% off discount until like the week after, where GameStop or like retailers do their 10% off during the week the game is releasing.
Okay, that makes sense. Sense. And then the other question is, if a lot of these gamers that are opposed to this will say to those guys that you're talking about that they're like, they have no problem spending the money on the virtual currency. When you say that to a lot of these gamers that are vocal and opposed to this, they will get really upset and they'll start saying things like, well, they don't know what they're missing. They're just wrong. And then that's when I'll call them entitled. I'll say, you honestly think your opinion of what a video game is just unassailable. That your opinion is, it's like the guy who walks into this guy's store and drops $100 on the game and the VC. He's a fucking moron. You just happen to be the smartest guy in the room, and we should just fucking listen to you. It's like, buddy, that's the goddamn definition of entitled. And they get so fucking upset with me. It's like, you can't call me entitled. I'm like, but you are, because you're telling that guy he's a moron for spending his money the way he wants to spend it. Drives me batshit, man, as you can tell.
That's interesting. I do want to move on to another topic here quickly regarding streaming services. And I don't know if you guys saw this. I actually put this in the Brap DM. Or was it you, buddy? I don't remember. But Verizon has been quietly beta testing a gaming streaming service. And it looks like we can add them to Google and anyone else that's trying to get into streaming. Look, I've said this for a long time. I do think streaming is probably the future of gaming at some point. I just think it's a matter of time. And look, I'm one. I don't need a console. Just give me a game. If I can access my games through my fucking TV, and I don't need an Xbox or a PlayStation, I'm okay by that. I really am.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I watch Netflix, Amazon Prime. I mean, I'm just, I feel like we've gotten to a point now where, video games is probably the one medium where we don't have. Well, I shouldn't say that, because you do have it with mobile games. You don't have the accessibility the way we do with like music and movies and TV shows. And I just think that's where this whole thing's going. We know about Microsoft investing in this. Sony's going to be getting into this. Nintendo, who knows what they're going to do. But the interesting with Verizon, the Verizon thing's interesting. Are you guys surprised? And I'm not. By all stretch of the imagination, I'm not surprised that Verizon's looking into this. But are you guys surprised by this?
I would say the only thing that surprised me was the graphic that had some Sony exclusives on it. So it kind of got me thinking, did Sony make a deal with Verizon to kind of put like PS Now on, like, say your Verizon box or something like that? I don't know. I mean, I guess we'll find out once this thing starts to roll out further. And I think, isn't it where they're doing this? They're beta testing it, but they're going to definitely do this in areas where there's like 5G, right? Well, because they already have 5G out starting late last year in at least 4 or 5 cities.
That's correct. Yeah.
So I mean, it's the future for sure. And it will advance as far as technology allows it. You know how it is in our country right now. We don't have like net neutrality's gone, and ISPs are going to do what they're going to do, but it's all going to be about how much money they can make out of it and the fast lanes and whatnot. I think there's always going to be a place for the home, the physical hardware, the home console. There's always going to be a place for that, because there are always going to be people who are just, I'm not going to go all digital. I'm not going to go all streaming. And there's always going to be pockets of the country where people just don't have that access, especially in the Midwest. So it's but for now we're seeing it really develop, but I don't think it's ever going to be like where, well, not ever, but it's not going to be probably within the next 10 years where it's just 80% of game sales and 80% of gaming is streaming. And then like 20% is just, everyone with their piece of hardware and they're playing it with an installed game on that hardware. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Interesting. Eric, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I'm kind of with slow-mo. Like, I'm not surprised by anybody on the level of some of the bigger corporations who, have like the infrastructure and want to throw their hat to that ring. I'm more intrigued by who they partner with, and like Slow-mo said, those in that graphic seeing like the Sony exclusives in there. So it's like, what does that mean?
What were the exclusives that were showed, Eric? Was it God of War? What else was up there?
Detroit was in there.
Detroit,
yeah.
And so that's definitely more intriguing. By what all that, will mean going forward,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Forte, being in the retail business. What are your thoughts, man? Forte is. Oh, there he is.
What was the question? My wife was talking to me. That's why I was muted.
Smart man. No, I was. We're asking the question. Like, what are your thoughts on the Verizon testing the streaming service? Do you think it's the future of gaming? And this potentially has ramification impact on the retail. I mean, we know what the possible, I guess, sale of GameStop. This could potentially impact them. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Well, the biggest thing is I feel like the more people that bring gaming to people is the best thing. I mean, I always look at it that way. No matter where gaming come from, it's always a good thing. When it comes to that, retail is retail. Sooner or later, we all know what's going to happen with retail. And, but that still doesn't change the fact that I think with Verizon doing this is them just basically branching themselves out to actually just want to. I mean, they have a massive amount of people that play games on their service already. Plus, they just have way too many people to even think of to actually use their service. My wife works for T-Mobile, one of their competitors, and they're even talking about, from what she told me at a meeting, that they're even looking at the gaming side of what they can do to actually start funding games, not mostly on AAA, but just like on the mobile side of everything. So I think this is going to be something that everybody's starting to tinker around with. But when it comes to retail, honestly, if we didn't, it just makes it happen faster than it should have happened. I think 4 to 5 years from now, maybe 6, long tail 10, you won't be buying brand new games out of a retail store. It'll probably be used games, mostly just like it was with retro games for a while. And then sooner or later, everything is just going to be digitally wherever you go.
All right. Interesting. B-Money.
Yeah, man, I'm not surprised at all. Just like any other entertainment industry where people realize they can tap it and gain some revenue. I think you'll see more people kind of throw their hat into this arena. And, game streaming is going to be the future. But I think, similar to some of the other services that we have, as long as things can be downloaded, that's going to be the smartest option for a lot of consumers. With that service. So we'll have to see, what Verizon does and what potentially, T-Mobile and other mobile services decide to do with this. But I think as long as you, give consumers the options to download and stream, that's where I think you'll see some success.
Yeah. Dave, I saw you nod your head when I said I think that streaming gaming is kind of the future where this thing's heading. Is that?
Oh, I was just masturbating. I'm sorry. What? That's how I do it. That's how I do it.
Oh my god!
I got them hooked up to the Kinect, so I'm just doing this. Anyway. Sorry, go ahead. I just couldn't help it. Go ahead.
So, oh my goodness. So do you think? What are your thoughts on the Verizon getting in the streaming business? And do you think this is the future?
Yeah, of course. I think two things. I think first off, it's fascinating to me that, like, my children who are 15 and 13, the idea that my daughter would even have the wherewithal to think she goes into a store to buy a game at this point it wouldn't occur to her. right? So that's something that I can't, that I grew up going into video game stores and Sears and JCPenney and before there were even GameStop. So the idea that she's just like, yeah, let me download new shit from the Epic Game Launcher or Origin because she plays The Sims, I think this is just more of that march of progress. I think the other thing is that I find interesting about this is that whenever it comes up in conversation, there is the inevitable statement that, well, there's not the infrastructure for it in this country and it's just not going to happen, or it's going to be a long time before it happens. And my answer is always the same, which is, okay, are you basically telling me that the billions of dollars being spent and the many big brains at places like Google that's doing this, they have Assassin's Creed right now that you can play in beta, live stream to your computer, Verizon, Microsoft, Sony, I mean, you're telling me that just some gamers on the internet came up with some eureka gotcha moment that these big brains didn't think of? It's like, oh, well, gosh darn it. We done spent $2 billion on this. I should have gone to the Twitters and seen that, yeah, there's some places in the country that ain't going to like this too much. What were we thinking? It's like, they got it. They got it. They got it. I assure you that they're looking into it and they either have a theory or a piece of technology, or they've run the numbers and said, you know what, fellas, by the time this comes out in a meaningful way in 4 years, the percentage of the country that will be blanketed to handle this in the way it needs to handle it will be enough for us to start making big fucking bank. So the idea that it's like this is some pie in the sky 20 years down the line when new technology gets invented that we haven't even heard of, that Elon Musk hasn't even thought up yet, I think that's wishful thinking on the part of gamers that don't want this to happen. But this is coming and it's going to happen, and I would be stunned if in 3 or 4 years we're not starting to see meaningful inroads to basically having the Netflix of gaming. That's what I think.
Yeah, you know what, Dave, I agree 110% with you, and I think you bring up a really interesting point about your daughter and how she buys video games. Like the idea of going to a store is like, well, wait a minute, why would I do that? I mean, I grew up, going to Sears, going to Babbage's, KB Toys, and buying video games that way, and and I look at, earlier before we went live, I mentioned my my 4-year-old plays the NES Classic, but for the other times that he's gaming on a mobile device.
Right. Of course.
And so and I always say this to people, like, I'm like, look, it's not about us anymore. It's not, I'm the old school gamer. I'm the one that grew up in the Atari 2600. My expectation of how I game is sit on the couch, front of the TV, right. Control in hand.
Go to the back of the TV and flip the RF switch from TV
to exactly. Yeah. If the cartridge isn't working, you blow in the cartridge.
That's right.
Yeah, and so how I grew up gaming is different than how my kids are going to grow up gaming, and their expectation is, hell, I have everything on the fly. I can hit speed dial on my cell phone, call my friends. I have Facebook. I can interact with people on the fly. I can buy music, video games on my.
And there'll always be the collectors, just like there's still collectors now. But they're going to get fewer and fewer, and they're going to become a niche, hopefully lucrative, but a niche market. It's just the way of the world. The thing that disappoints me the most is just how predictable we are. It's like you'd like to think that eventually we will evolve into a set of humans at some generation where we will go, you know what? I get this. This is that knee-jerk reaction to technology that as you get older and you get concretized in your way of thinking, you automatically don't like it because it's different and you think what you grew up with is the best and damn the torpedoes, let's stop it. And you'd think that we would have evolved enough to go, oh, fellas, relax. This is what happens. This is the part where we're supposed to transition into the angry old people yelling about technology. And it's just like, just relax. It's going to be fine. I think it's going to be fine. I think it's going to be fine.
I agree. And look, I'm all for, having an Xbox app. I know if you say that's unpopular, an Xbox app, I can't even say that, on my TV. I would love that. I would love it. Give me a controller, Xbox app on my TV.
Well, you won't even need that. You're not going to, what is Xbox? You might have a Microsoft app that plays Microsoft games, but there will be no more Xbox. I mean, why would you need something called an Xbox? It'll just stream to whatever device you're on, your TV, your phone, whatever.
Well, I think it was interesting. I think you made a point before about you think in a few years, maybe like 3 or 4 years, we'll be talking about like the Netflix of gaming. I think a lot of people already kind of see Game Pass as that, as you're able to, like $10 a month. You can play 200 games, download them to, I think it's on PC now too, as well as Xbox.
Not yet. When it is, I'm getting it because I don't have an Xbox. I'm dying for it to hit PC, but they haven't actually released it on PC yet, but they say they're going to. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's fucking great. It's a little different because it's not streaming, but at least it's got part of the puzzle, and it's wonderful, and it's doing really well.
Yep, and all their first party games go directly there, like day one. That's
what a deal, man! What a fucking deal! I can't imagine Sony is not going to be able to. They're going to have to respond to that.
They don't have to
do that with PS Now. You think they'll do the same with PS Now?
If they don't, I mean, again, it's just one more feather in the cap. I mean, right now, like I don't know, like if somebody walks into your store or Slow Mo store today and says, "What should I buy?" It's hard to. I can't imagine you're like, "Oh yeah, man, go buy an Xbox." I mean, the system to own right now is a PS4, I think, but it's one more reason next generation. If Sony doesn't have that, to buy an Xbox, why would you not? If you're a parent or if you're a kid or whatever, and you're like, you're telling me for $10 a month I can get all I can eat, and it's the first party goddamn originals. What the fuck? You goddamn right, I'm buying that over the PlayStation. So I would be stunned if PlayStation doesn't respond. PlayStation Now at least has started to let you download games, so you don't have to stream them. But the fact that they don't have their first party games day one, that's gonna fucking nail them.
Yeah, I have gotten to the point because, working at the store, I try not to try to sway people in a certain direction to buy their systems in. I just always used to tell people like, hey, where do your friends play at and what games do you like to play? And let that be the deciding factor. But as of lately, people ask me that question. I was like, dude, Xbox all day just because you don't have to pay but $10 to get all the first party games.
But the first party games aren't that great compared to PlayStation.
Well, right now.
They will.
We don't know what's going to be. We don't know what it's going to be in the future yet.
Right.
Yeah, that might change when around time Gears 5 comes out later this year. Then you'll really see what how the service really takes off and that.
Could be. Yeah, I got. It's Forte who owns the store, right? Sorry about that.
I wish I owned the store.
No, you don't. No, well, maybe. I wouldn't want anywhere near that business right now. That's a horrible business in terms of owning it. I mean, they're trying to fucking sell it. It's clearly not working.
Yeah, Forte is Forte. I'm concerned for you, my friend.
I'm good, brother. Trust me. I got a backup. I got an exit plan.
Yeah, that's good to hear. That's good to hear.
What'll be great though is when GameStop goes under, though, it will be great if maybe we can start to see the rise of specialty mom and pop game stores that come back a little bit. They're never going to be what they were. Yeah. But some game stores that are still like into the customer service and into the collectibles and into the collectors and really have that kind of community gaming stop again, I think will be great. And it's not going to happen as long as, GameStops are still in business, at least not in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oh, by the way, Ryan Landis in the live chat said, you didn't have a real Atari 2600 unless it smelled like cigarette smoke.
Oh, thanks.
There's actually some truth to that. I thought it was pretty funny. All right, gentlemen, let's go to. I do want to talk about one more thing because we didn't get a chance to talk about this. This is pretty big news last week, and since I was out sick, we all know about Bungie leaving Activision.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is Forte. You and I talked about this on PTK's podcast on Saturday, and Forte, I want to go to you because you are the Destiny guru of the podcast here. I'm not. I had my run at Destiny, and it was a love-hate relationship, and I said enough.
Let me sit back for a second because Forte about to get on his soapbox. So let me get.
I ain't gonna get on my soapbox. Not at all. I have no soapbox to get onto. No, man. So for me, perfect. Okay, so this is how I feel about the whole situation. First, I want people to understand that Bungie, I still feel, has more of most of this stuff falls on the feet of Bungie. I think Activision was used as the scapegoat for a lot of people's displeasures that they felt in the game when it came to microtransactions and stuff. I think the only thing Activision really held them to was those deadlines. I think those deadlines was the number one thing that they said, like, hey, you have to hit these deadlines in order for us to, be able to get these games out and release. Some people forget that Destiny 1 was pushed back a year. It's supposed to come out in 2013. It was renegotiated to come out in 2014 by Activision and Bungie. So they already had a renegotiation for the first time that the game got released and pushed back. Same thing with Destiny 2. They renegotiated that, and they just had to hit these deadlines. People want to blame Activision for the microtransactions in the game, but that was a Bungie initiative to help, make up the money that Activision wasn't getting by them not being able to get the content out as fast. Bungie actually went to Activision and say, hey, we're going to use the Eververse, we're going to do drip feed content in the game, and we're going to use Eververse to fund development for the game so we can pay you guys back the money a little bit faster. So that's where I think Activision's whole part of this whole thing is. I just feel like they just were in a situation where they wanted them to make the game and get those games out in time, and Bungie wasn't able to do it. Now, with Bungie being off on their own, well, Bungie has never been off on their own. They were as soon as they was about to bring out Halo, they got bought up by Microsoft. Microsoft had them for 6 to 7 years, and the biggest thing with that is as soon as they left Microsoft, they went to Activision. So I think it's a great thing that Bungie's off by themselves. My only caveat to that is don't think that this is going to be an easy road for Bungie. They've never self-published before. That's not an easy thing to do. Not an easy thing at all to do. And people that think that this is going to change, like, microtransactions are going to come out of the game, or we're going to get better content. Well, we might get better content, but who's going to flip the bill for all that marketing that Destiny got? The one thing I always told people, Bungie and Activision know how to put a trailer out. They know how to get you excited for a game. And who's going to be flipping the bill for all that stuff? That all falls at the feet of Bungie now. So everything's not peaches and roses, but I am super excited that they are giving this a chance. And I hope they succeed in it because they're my favorite developer over the last 15 years, honestly.
So what Forte's saying is Bungie now has to get an apartment,
basically,
and start over. Be out of the home for a while. To see how things go. Right.
I mean, the biggest question is, so Jaffe, what do you think with them? They've never self-published. Well, I mean, I think they have self-published before on their own for their early. For their PC games
and stuff like
that. But their last few games, they've never done it. So what do you think that's going to look like for them going forward?
Well, I mean, obviously they knew what they were getting into. Didn't they publish Oni, or was that another publisher?
Actually, I think they did publish Oni. It was on PS1 or PS2.
PS2. But I mean, times have changed. I mean, look, they're a big fucking smart company. They either basically broke off from Activision with the assumption that they would find some kind of co-publishing deal for someone to come in and handle their marketing issues and their distribution issues, or they're like, look, fellas, we looked in the bank, we have enough money, we're going to build up those divisions. So I mean, they're a smart group. I'm sure they know what they're getting into. I'm honestly not a big, Destiny fan. The last time I played Destiny seriously was when let me see if it's still here. Right, that's the last time. Could you hear that?
What you say?
No.
Oh, you couldn't hear what I just played? Okay.
Yeah, I heard the sound. I thought you said something else. Yeah,
I was saying basically when they were doing the Wizard Came from the Moon memes, that's the last time I played Destiny in a serious way. So I'm good to stand back on the sidelines on this one and have, I don't really have an opinion either way. It's clearly, it wasn't a good relationship with Activision. I don't know if it was Ike Turner, Tina Turner bad, or if it just wasn't a good, healthy fit.
Right.
But ultimately, I'm always happy to see creative people get the ability to go out and sort of make their own way. So I think it's probably going to be a good thing for gamers either way, but I really don't know enough about it to have much of an opinion.
How traditionally does it happen for a developer, a publisher, a developer to leave a publisher and keep the IP?
Well, let me ask you. So Bungie was never owned by Activision, correct?
Never owned. They just
True,
published.
true.
They just published Destiny for them. That's it.
So usually, what happens? The only thing I'm familiar with is, I mean, this is a weird situation because usually what happens is if you are a developer and your game is canceled, even small developers like Bartlett Jones, there's kind of boilerplate language in the contract that says, let's say you're making a game with Sony and Sony cancels it. There's language in almost every contract that says, hey, look, as long as you can pay us the development money back, you can have your game back. And a lot of times even Sony would be like, or other companies would be like, you don't have to pay us back until you get a deal. So let's say you're making a kind of a new take on Twisted Metal with Sony, and you spend $3 million and Sony cancels it. You could then go out to 10 other publishers, and if it turns out, Devolver wants it, as long as Devolver pays the money back that Sony invested, that's a pretty common thing. I've never heard of a developer making a game for a publisher where that publisher has invested a huge amount of money in building the intellectual property up like they've done in Destiny, and then they just let the developer go with the IP, even if the developer chooses to pay for it. So my guess is because Bungie was such a big fucking get, that was some really amazing legalese that was in the contract at the beginning. Because it's so uncommon that I would say this is probably the only time I've ever heard of it.
Yeah, because they were on the hook for 8 titles altogether. Well, 4 titles, so Destiny 1 through 4, and a supplicant Comet, which is their mid-release in between every September. So 4 of each one, and they basically canceled the contract halfway through. So part of me really wants to know, like, how much of this was Bungie and how much it was Activision. We know Activision did come out on their earnings call and say that Destiny wasn't it wasn't performing up to expectations.
This is so simple. It's the same issue that we had when we were talking about EA and Star Wars.
Yeah.
When you have really creative people, they do not want to go to the dance with the obnoxious business people.
I agree with that.
Right? Creative people have no problem with good business people. But Activision and EA, and I will say this as a guy who one day may still need to go back and get a job in video games, and I'm okay burning those bridges with both of those companies. Those companies are great companies in terms of taking care of their shareholders. They don't care about making art. They don't care about making artistic statements. They don't care about pushing the medium forward unless it's specifically tied to money, fucking money. And that's okay. I got no problem with that. I would just never want anywhere near a company like that. So if you're the kind of visionaries that work at a company like Bungie, or that are running, or like Amy on the Star Wars game, or you're trying to be a storyteller, these 2 big stories of the first of this year should be all you need from now on to say, that's not for you. Don't sign a deal with that particular devil because they don't drink from the same well you drink from. The things that matter to them are not the things that matter to you. And so I would absolutely bet that there was a lot of friction. And look, I mean, I can't speak to Bungie's earnings or to Destiny's earnings, but when you have Activision basically being disappointed when the new Call of Duty comes out and sells $500 million of product in 3 days, and they say that's a disappointment, my response, if I'm on the development team, is go suck a bag of dicks, motherfucker. We just made you guys $500 million fucking in 3 days, and you're going to call what we did a disappointment? Go fuck yourself, is what I would say.
And that's that's the one thing that I really, and if anything that Bungie did, that's the one thing I want to applaud them for. When Activision came out with that earnings call and said that it was they felt like Destiny was underperforming, Luke Smith went to Twitter and said, "We at Bungie are happy with the game we made. We feel like it's performed very well." They said it performed over what they thought it would perform, and they will continue to keep making the game that they want to make. And I believe that was basically the straw that broke the camel's back, honestly, when it came to showing exactly what the difference is between Bungie and Activision we're seeing. So Bungie saying that and them actually putting that to paper and coming out and saying it was very welcome, a very welcome sight to me. So that's why I hope them the best when they come to, because I play Destiny every day.
And let's be clear, I'm not knocking EA or Activision. I'm just saying that for artistic people, it's like kryptonite. It's like you guys are on a different fucking planet when it comes to what creative people think are important. And so I'm just not surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. B Money, Eric, do you guys have any thoughts on this? Slow-mo?
I was actually just thinking about how, and I read this in Jason Schreier's book when he talked about Destiny. How
you're a provocateur, Slow-mo.
Yeah.
Every time you say Jason Schreier, I'm like, we are provocateurs.
Yeah, of course, right? So yeah, I think he said that he wrote in the book that they had shopped Destiny to every publisher really out there, and like Activision was like basically at that point the only game in town. I do kind of wonder, like, if you're in that position where you kind of understand who Activision is, and it's not necessarily where you want to go, but then who else is there to go to? Do you go the route of like a Digital Extremes and try to self-publish like they did with Warframe, or do you, you go ahead and you have that dinner with the devil and see what happens? It almost kind of, I don't really blame them for it, because it's just like, well, where else are we going to go for the kind of game and to make the kind of game that we want to make? But then in the long run,
there's a lot of companies, though. That's the thing, is that first party is fucking great for that shit. If you go to Sony, if you go to Microsoft these days, they want artistic products. That's what they're doing so fucking well with.
Yeah.
It just really upsets me a little bit, being a huge Halo fan and being a Destiny fan, that the direction that Microsoft decided to go in a different direction with their games media back in 2011. That's when they started switching over to basically Connect games, and that's like the worst thing that ever happened to Microsoft to me, because the Connect took off when it first released. I mean, it sold 10 million SKUs. I mean, it sold a lot when it first released, and I think that success made Microsoft pivot in a different direction than they should have. And if they would have knew what they had in Bungie and let them just actually make that Destiny game, because they were trying to make it in 2008 when we saw the Easter egg inside of ODST in 2010. So the idea was already there. The Traveler was on the wall. So the idea was there. Bungie didn't have any quarrels with Microsoft. They just wanted to not make Halo games for the rest of their life. And I just wish they would have had that forward thinking to say, hey, we can make this other studio. They still could have had 343 still make Halo games and transfer all that stuff over to them. But Microsoft decided that they thought Connect games were more important than new IPs like Destiny, and unfortunately, that's how Bungie ended up in the situation they're in now.
Yeah, a lot of those executives are gone now. So I mean,
exactly.
I think they're on the right track now.
So I think today's Microsoft would have allowed Destiny to make Destiny and made a 343 to continue Halo. I think today's Microsoft would have done that.
Who the fuck knows? We don't know what's going to happen. Destiny may emerge in 2 months and say, hey, we have a deal to be exclusive for our first 3 games on Xbox. I mean, Microsoft's throwing money around like crazy.
I was going to say that, like, could we see those two those two parties reunite? I mean, Phil Spencer and I don't know if it was Aaron Greenberg or Major Nelson, but they were definitely on Twitter saying, hey, congratulations, wish you the best, yada, yada, yada. We look forward to working with you guys in the future.
Right. Yeah, what a story, man.
I mean,
what kind of deal would that be? Would it be something like Xbox and PC players play together on Destiny, that would be crazy. That's all I want.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
I don't know. It's. I mean, it's really a question of how much money Microsoft wants to spend, right? Or how much money Sony wants to spend. Like I said at the beginning of this, the real question is Sony aware? And I know those guys really well for the most part. They're smart. I'm sure they are. But I wonder if I sat down with him and said, "Are you guys aware, or what do you think about the opinion that you guys need to diversify?" I wonder if they would say, "No, we're going to just stay the course. It's working," because can you imagine Microsoft's lineup if they have Gears of War, Halo, and Destiny all exclusive to Xbox? I mean, what the fuck?
I mean, that would be huge. And then you throw in, some of the other stuff that the newer studios, the Obsidians and Ninja Theory.
Oh, yeah, and then you throw in Game Pass and it's day one free. I'm like, come on, man. I mean, I personally root for Sony. They gave me my career. I love a lot of those people over there.
Yeah.
I want everybody to do well. And I'm sure they will. But I'm so excited as more of a fan now than a developer to sit back and go, strategically speaking, how are these companies going to play their cards? Because I could see Sony going, you're telling me you want us to get out of our comfort zone that has served us so beautifully for the last 5 years, and you want us to sort of kick the hornet's nest and run the risk of upsetting the apple cart? And it's like, I think you guys are going to have to do that, or you're going to get creamed. But who knows?
I am of the mindset of a person that believes that the reason it's such a disparity in systems sold this generation is because the people that bought PlayStations like they did during the PlayStation 3 era. But all those people that bought PlayStation 3s, that bought 360s, they bought 360s too. They bought both. A lot of people had both systems last generation. Not so much this generation because Microsoft hasn't given a compelling reason for you to own an Xbox. And that is the thing that's going to change.
I worked in the fucking industry. I don't own a goddamn Xbox because not only do they not have a lot of exclusive games, but I can get them on fucking PC. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever fucking heard of. I'm grateful as a guy who has PC. The Game Pass is coming to PC, but what the fuck is that about? Why would you want to let me not buy your hardware because I can play it on my own fucking system?
Yeah, that's the biggest point right there. And I bet you Microsoft would tell you, they say, well, if we don't have to make they're still making a box, which is the one thing. Now, if they were saying they weren't making a box anymore, it would be easier to comprehend it. But they'll probably just come out and say, like, hey, we just want to give people options. And I think that was the biggest conversation that was happening through the last 3 years between Microsoft and Xbox. PlayStation always gave you the ability to have an option in what you wanted to play because they had so much variety in their different games. Microsoft says, okay, well, we don't have the variety in our games, but we can give you the option to play where you want, however you want, and we have a better value proposition around that because we already have a platform in PC that we're natively a part of already. So I think Satya Nadella gave Phil Spencer all that money to basically do what he wanted to do, just because they say, hey, if we can get more people playing our games in different places and not just on the box itself, I'm 100% in on making Xbox part of the leadership team.
Isn't it a win-win for Microsoft anyway? I mean, I don't think they really care if it's Xbox or PC, right?
Well, I'm sure some divisions do, but sure. I guess maybe their logic is that the number of people who have a PC that can run Forza or run Sea of Thieves are probably not really console gamers anyway. And so maybe they've run the numbers and said, if you have a choice between playing on PC at all, you're probably not that inclined to have an Xbox anyway. So maybe it's not worth the loss, but I couldn't tell you what the logic is.
Yeah, Shannon Loftus came out, I want to say early last year, or maybe it was the year before. She said that they ran numbers and they said the crossover between PC and Xbox when it comes to play anywhere is very slim.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense then.
Yeah. Eric B. Money, any thoughts on Activision Bungie before we wrap this up?
No, I'm just like I kind of said before, just intrigued to see what Bungie can do, kind of like all on their own, without kind kind of leaning more toward like Forte's saying, like, you know, it does kind of sound, and I didn't even think about this, that no onus has been kind of put on Bungie. Everyone's kind of like, oh yeah, well, screw Activision because like they're the complete scumbags, which we know they can be. But now it's kind of on them. It's on Bungie, like, hey,
yep.
you know, it's your game to implement. And so now let's see what you can do with it, or whatever you want to do next. You know. So yeah, so that's the more intriguing part to me.
Yeah. All right. What about you, B?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I feel like anytime you can get away from a big publisher and kind of stand on your own 2 feet, you know, it gives you more creative freedom, but it also gives you more responsibility at the end of the day. And I think, you know, a lot of people have blamed Activision for what has happened with Destiny, and I think there's, you know, a lot of blame that can go around between Bungie and Activision as far as, you know, the complete product that we receive. So. It's going to be interesting to see what they do on their own. You know, Jaffe brought up a good point about Sony kind of recognizing, you know, some things that they could change up in next generation, and how big of a get would it be to get Bungie as an exclusive, you know what I mean, partner, you know, going into next generation. So that'll be another thing to kind of look at too. You know, I know Sony isn't just sitting back in the wing, you know, watching what Microsoft is doing. You know, we saw some things a couple weeks ago about them looking at to hire some people to maybe make some acquisitions in the future. So that could be part of that. So we got to sit back and kind of watch as the story unfolds.
Yeah. Some great points.
Or at the very least, protecting their second party from Microsoft, because you know that there's that word out that Microsoft is courting one of their second party developers. So I mean, at the very least, try to keep what you got and maybe make some of those second party guys first party so that you can continue to get those exclusives and going on into next gen. And even when it comes to Bungie, I know maybe this is just me, but I would really love if Destiny 3 wasn't called Destiny 3. It was just called like Destiny, or just call it Destiny. I don't care.
Yeah.
But make it one SKU, and where they just keep iterating off of that same game, you know, continuing on and on, kind of like how Warframe is. Like Warframe came out like a year before Destiny, and it's still really just one big, massive game with a bunch of updates. I would love that. But I mean, we'll see what happens here.
Well, I know we about to shut it down, but I do have to ask Jaffe one question. God of War, one of my favorite franchises of all time. The reason I own a PlayStation every generation that it comes out is for the hope of a God of War game. Cool. What did you think of God of War when you found out how they were redoing it, and what did you think of the game after it released?
So there is this podcast I listen to called the Basement Arcade podcast, and you can listen to that if you hadn't had your dumbass here late.
Minutes of the show I missed. I will be there. Get me.
Get him.
I will be there. Hey, I will.
Maybe one of these fine friends of yours can send you a link or something, help you out.
I will rewind this video. I retract my question, sir, because I missed my favorite part of the show.
And you know what's funny about that is it wouldn't surprise me if somebody is watching this down the line who's like, Jaffe's so rude. He just wouldn't tell the guy what he wanted to know.
Right.
I'm joking. My God. I haven't played it as the high concept. I have not played it yet.
Oh, okay.
And you can go back and he talks about it too.
I'm going back. I'm about to scroll back as soon as this is over.
Yeah, yeah. And David, you're right. You'll probably get tweets about this too.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It's the thing that annoys. I mean, I'm trying to learn to not let the internet get to me as much as it usually does. So, like a lot of people, when they hear that, are like, "He's just fucking salty." Please don't say salty anymore. It's 2019. Please stop doing that. First off,
exactly.
Second, don't say the feels. Please, come on, man. It's awful. It's almost as bad as saying talk to the hand in 2019. Please stop doing it. But that aside, though, you know, it fascinates me that people just won't take my answer at face value. It's like Corey's a great guy. The team's a great team. I'm still good friends with Shannon. I talked to her on the phone like a month ago. She's like, come to Santa Monica. Let's have lunch. I have nothing but love for that team and gratitude that game continues to have legs well after I've left it. If they keep doing what they're doing, I may be on my deathbed at hopefully 95 and people still know who the fuck Kratos is. What an amazing achievement that I got to have something to do with that. It's got nothing to do with being upset. I just don't want to play it anymore. I'm over games like that right now. And people just will not let that be an answer. I don't know why they're looking for conspiracy theories, but they are.
Yeah, I remember you were like, weren't you guys kind of going back and forth with someone on your show? Like they just could not fathom and believe what you were saying. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'm trying to build a new business. I got 2 fucking teenage kids. I'm trying to get some fucking fat off my body because I'm fucking almost 50 and I look like the Pillsbury Doughboy every fucking day more and more. I'm not going to play a game that doesn't fucking, I'll get a story from Netflix or the movies. That's just what I like these days. But people will not believe me, man. They won't believe me. I don't have to tell you.
Wow, that's interesting. That's interesting. I've speaking of gaming, I've been in a gaming funk. We talked about this before we went live. I don't know what it is. I'm in a gaming funk, and I've been actually watching more Netflix recently.
Is that a Fallout 76 hat you got on?
Yes, it is.
Oh my god.
Yes, you like
what
that?
What kind of a gaming funk are you in? Like nothing pleases you? Do you have a PC?
No, I don't have a.
He's fickle to begin with, so
Yeah.
Here we go. Everyone's going to pile on Enrique now. No, I'm not fickle.
What are you streaming on right now if you don't have a PC?
No, I don't have a gaming PC. I mean, I have a laptop. I probably.
The minute I left Bartlett Jones with a pretty beefy computer, and I was never a PC gamer for the most part. I've grown up being a console guy like you. I got a system before the Atari 2600 called the Telestar. That's how console I am. But and I've had Steam, but after leaving Bartlett Jones, the last year, 90% of my gaming is on PC with Steam, with Epic, with Origin, and little sites like itch.io. When you open your worldview to PC gaming, and I don't just mean like the high-end PC gaming stuff, I mean everything from the craziest, weirdest fucking indie shit all the way up to big budget exclusive games released for the PC. The amount of variety and unique games, it totally changes your relationship with video games. If all of your game relationship is console, I don't blame you for being in a funk because everything is getting samey because everything's getting more expensive. And so they have to appeal to a bigger and bigger audience that doesn't speak the language a hardcore longtime gamer speaks. So I highly advise you, even just on your laptop, go to itch.io. There's some crazy fucking games out there that will inspire the fuck out of you and make you fall in love with gaming all over again.
And then you won't want a console anymore.
What's that?
And then you won't want a console anymore.
That's like I am right now. I'm fine.
Brother, I always tell people, if I could get enough of my friends to go over to PC, I would probably stop playing console. That has technically happened in the last 2 weeks. If I find it very hard to turn on my Xbox or my PlayStation, mostly because there's nothing that's out that I want to play that's exclusive to those platforms anymore.
Right.
But PC, man, once you get into that ecosystem and it starts wrapping its hands around you, it's hard to get away.
A great example. I'm sorry, I would say a great example of that was last night where we were playing Iron Banner and Destiny on Xbox, and this Forte joins our Xbox Live party from his PC. We don't know he's on PC, and so we were like, "Hey, you going to join us?" No, I'm playing on PC, and everyone was just like. So we had to shame him for a good 30 minutes to get him to finally get off his PC, dust off his Xbox, and join us.
Somebody, console gamers shaming somebody for playing on PC is like 2 guys with ugly girls shaming their friend for going out with Beyonce. He's not the guy that needs to be shamed. He's playing on the best system.
Tell him. It's a whole nother. Man, when you playing the same game I'm playing, but I'm playing at 100 plus frames per second at
with
14
a mouse and a keyboard, and you're ordering a goddamn pizza
with an ultrawide monitor, looking at beauty.
Yeah, and let me tell you something else. The other thing is that you can't underestimate is just the simplicity of access. When you can sit there and the computer you work on and do emails on and order food on and shop on Amazon, and then you just click a window and you're right back in for 5-10 minutes. Getting through a single player level in Call of Duty, or not Call of Duty anymore, but whatever it is you're playing, that ease in and out and transition into the game world being effortless versus sitting down, changing the input on your television, getting the controller, make sure it's charged up, make sure the coffee table's pulled up close to your couch, you can put your feet up. All those little fucking things add up, and it's amazing how much that does matter of what you choose to game on when the gaming bug hits you at any moment.
I love Jaffe, man. He just made console gaming sound complex as hell with that one statement.
It's not complex. There are some hoops you have to jump through, and if you're busy, and hell, you got 4 fucking kids, man. You're busy, right?
Yeah.
There are hoops you got to jump through that when you can just go, oh, okay, I think the baby's still sleeping. She's kind of waking up. I can hear it on the monitor, but I probably got about 6 minutes. Fuck it. Click. I'm back in the game world. And then you're out 6 minutes later. Those minutes add up versus like I don't have time to sit down, power up the PC, get the controller. That shit matters. I know it sounds minor, but it's not.
No, I hear you, and I think you really touched upon a great point. I got into this funk after I finished Spider-Man on PS4, and it's like you kind of mentioned it's like I'm looking for something that's maybe not there because all these games are kind of created the same now, like you said, like they're created to appeal to a larger audience, and I think that's the funk. Like I'm looking for something unique, something to kind of wow me. And I'm backlogged. Like I have games I can play. It's not the issue. I just don't want to play them.
Kind of puzzly adventure games, or you like more straight up action?
I think it depends. I mean, I would look at like puzzle games, or I would be open to anything really.
Well, there's a game called Return to the Obra Dinn that I think you can absolutely run on your PC laptop. And it may not be paced for what you want. So I recommend looking into it, but it's one of the best games I've played all year long. And I've never played a game that plays like it. It is absolutely a very unique gameplay experience that really flexes very different muscles of your brain that you're not used to having flexed in video games. And I highly recommend looking into it if you're looking for something different and fresh, but really cool.
All right. I'll have to definitely check that out then.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
right, well, you know what's amazing about the PC that I've done in the time that we've been on this chat?
What's that?
I ordered dinner and it's showing. Think about that. How great is that? I can be on a podcast with people all over the goddamn world, talk about video games and order dinner. Do that, fucking Nintendo Switch, motherfucker.
Nintendo Switch can definitely not do that. It can barely do online gaming correctly.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Would you like a pizza? What's your friend code? Fuck you. That's what I say.
Yeah.
I have a Switch. I'm not an anti-console gamer at all. I'm just saying that when you've been to the mountain, it's hard to go back down to the valley. Let's just put it that way.
That's true. That's true. So, all right, gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and wrap up the show. David, it has been a pleasure having you on.
We'd love to having me.
No, absolutely. Our pleasure. And we'd love to have you back on again. Hopefully it doesn't take 2 years next time.
Yeah.
But no, definitely enjoy your perspective. And everyone who listened and tuned in live, thank you for stopping by and hanging out with us. I did drop a link to David's YouTube channel, so definitely check that out. David, you stream like I think almost every day, every other day?
I just hired we just hired our first producer, and so I'm working right now. The schedule's a little up in the air. Tomorrow we're streaming at 11:30, and
Okay.
So what we're doing, and we do lots of chat. The chat's a huge part of it. It's not like the chat gets ignored. The chat is 90% of it. Sometimes we do phone calls, but tomorrow it's 11:30, and then we're on and off. I used to do it every day. We may go back to every day, but I'm trying to kind of work with the producer to figure out how good of a fit she is. And she's only on 2 days a week right now. So, but all I know for sure is tomorrow at 11:30, we're going to go live. We're going to talk about. I'll tell you. Let me give you the pitch. Let me give you the plug. We're going to talk about. Well, we're gonna definitely talk about PlayStation, Microsoft, and Switch and their advertising spending over the holidays. There's some really interesting stuff to talk about there. We're gonna talk about this NFL player who basically beat the fuck out of this guy who was masturbating in front of his teenage daughter's window.
What?
What?
I didn't see it. I didn't hear about this.
Yeah, I'll tell you who he is. Tony Beckham from Detroit Lions. So
What?
Oh, Lord. Of course, it's the Detroit Lion. I live here.
we're gonna talk about this video game called this actual game called Cut the Wire that was banned from toy stores over the holidays because it's basically a block of TNT and it's got all these wires and you have scissors and it's a race to basically defuse the bomb before it blows up. And it's been kicked out of toy stores because people say it like inspires racism and terrorism and shit. So we got a lot of fun topics to talk about. So if you're interested, 11:30 tomorrow, you can find me at David Scott Jaffe at Twitter, and I'll give you links there. So I hope to see you. And you guys, it's always fun. And hopefully I'll be back soon. See you guys.
Yeah, no, thank you. And
Awesome.
again, everyone in the live chat, thank you again for stopping by, hanging out with us tonight. To my co-hosts, big thank you. Mad love for you guys as well. We'll be back next week, same time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So everyone have a great rest of the week and a wonderful weekend as well. We'll see you next week.
Where we're going to be at Saturday.
Oh, yes, that's right. I almost forgot. On Saturday, we're going to be on Boom. I can't remember.
Double Barrel Gaming. Yeah.
Thank you. I always call Boom. I always call him Boom from now on. It's Boomstick XL. But yeah, we'll be on Double Barrel Gaming's podcast. We're actually going to be the featured podcast. He did this about a month ago with the Iron Lords. So
Guys, that's the door. That's the food. I'll see you guys. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. All right. David.
Thank you,
Take care,
bro.
David.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, so we'll be on Double Barrel Gaming on Saturday at 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Boom has been kind enough to invite us to be his feature podcast under the Iron Lords. I think we're on about a month ago, so definitely looking forward to that. Definitely check that out. So on that note, we are out. Everyone have a great rest of the week. Peace.
Peace.
Later.
I'm going to Bros Barbecue after this.
Man, that sounds so good.
I'm hungry. Peace.
Now I got to.